Could you talk a little bit about whether Shakespeare had any understanding or perception of Malaysia or even of Southeast Asia more generally?
References to Malaysia in Shakespeare, no, not that I know of at least. Someone might prove me wrong. I'd be very happy to be proven wrong on that. But we do have reference to India, for example. And so in the Midsummer Night's Dream, quite famously, you have the fairy king and queen, Titania and Oberon, and they're fighting over this boy who is referred to as the Indian boy. And in describing the backstory to this boy's origin, we have references to the spiced Indian air and the idea of ships bringing back merchandise. And so that gives us a snapshot into what's happening in Shakespeare's time. The idea that that's when you have international trade coming up. That's when you have merchants based in London who are pooling their resources together in order to travel to all these other nations and to bring back spices, cinnamon, cloves, what have you. So in many ways, you'll find that references have a lot to do with trade. And repeatedly in Shakespeare's plays, you'll find references to international trade.
There's, of course, the presentation of Caliban in The Tempest,
Mm.
but Caliban is a native of the island, and he's, in a sense, colonized by the protagonist. Could you talk a little
That's
bit
right.
about the presentation of Caliban and how it can be read in perhaps differing ways?
Sure, I'm glad you brought that up. So The Tempest is this one play that has become really important in post-colonial readings, because traditionally it's been understood that Prospero, this magician who comes and inhabits the island, that he represents Shakespeare. For a long time, the fashion was to read Shakespeare's plays biographically, and therefore, based on that scholarship, they've told us that Prospero represents Shakespeare himself as an Asian playwright, and at the end of the play, when Prospero leaves his magic behind, that is Shakespeare's farewell to the stage. A lot of that, of course, is based on conjecture. We don't actually have hard evidence for any of that. But that was the traditional reading. And based on that reading, a character like Caliban, who is described to us as being half fish, a bit like a monster, he's presented as this really abhorrent creature who deserves to be mistreated, deserves to be taught a good lesson, and he tries to stand up for himself. And by the end of the play, deserves to be left behind on the island while everybody else leaves and goes on to better things. But the post-colonial reading has challenged that and presented Caliban as a figure for the experience of those who are colonized. That we have this, power who comes in suddenly invading onto your space, demanding the right to govern your space and to govern you, and on top of that, to dictate and define who you are. Post-colonial readings would emphasize that the ways in which Caliban is described in the play, those are actually words spoken out by different characters. And so that's their perception of him. He may not look like a monster at all. In fact, there are some performances which present him looking like a completely normal, average-looking human. And that just highlights that really he's being taught to see himself in a particular way. And this is part of that larger enterprise to be able to dominate him and his resources.